welcome again. I hope everyone can hear me. I would want to introduce quickly BrainJar and Condorcet to have to open this up and get the convo on Bribe, the launch, and what we're planning on doing. BrainJar, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Condorcet actually.
All right, Condorcet.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for being here. Especially if you were with us yesterday and just here for more. Hopefully, would love to dive back into audience questions and stuff. But context for everyone who was not here yesterday. We are, hosting the series of AMAs to kick off the LBP, which is happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Copper Launch. The Bribe LBP, of course, going to be the first minted tokens that are out there and ready to be used in the Bribe application. Total launch of 2.5 million Bribe tokens, which is 2.5% of supply. And yeah, just a really great fair launch opportunity. Honestly, as we were talking about yesterday, despite the state of the market right now, frankly, we're still having folks jump on for these conversations. It seems like people are still quite excited for the event. So yeah, let's not delay. Happy to talk about Bribe here and talk some more about the LBP.
Awesome. Yeah. Should we open it to the audience first? I had some technical questions, but they're answered in terms of custody and stuff like that. Should we open it to the audience? So if anyone has some questions, maybe you guys can tap in, and I will invite you on stage.
Well, while everyone's getting set, I think you should ask the custody question. Actually,
Yeah. So the question is are my Aave tokens at risk if I use them on the Bribe's platform for contract risk? That was the question I had before, and maybe you can give everyone the explanation.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very important question. Kind of remiss that we haven't posted an entire article about this. I mean, it's important, and to be honest, we'll talk about this as part of our article explaining the audit that's been done on Bribe, first by Trail of Bits, now confirmed by kind of another auditing firm. Again, before I get into the explanation, governance these days does not work intuitively, and that is because there are not strong markets around it. So sometimes we're going to make decisions that seem unintuitive, but we'll communicate and explain why to you all, and we'll kind of just ask for some mutual trust. So first answer is yes, I agree. This seems unintuitive. Voting has delegation. Why wouldn't we just use delegation for Bribe? However, we have confirmed with some of the best audit firms and auditors that there are in the space that this is a good approach and that this approach is secure. Okay, so why did we actually do this? Well, it turns out that delegation is a much less kind of well-proven method of transferring votes than staking is. It kind of gets back to the point that we were talking about yesterday, that technically speaking, any lending protocol like Aave or Compound works as a bribe mechanism because you can borrow votes there, which where while you're kind of not actually exposed to the underlying value of the vote. That is to say, if I borrow a bunch of Aave on Compound, then if the value of Aave goes down, it's kind of all the better for me. It doesn't actually matter. So in effect, Compound works as this non-transparent bribery mechanism. Okay. In that same vein, it is very well understood how protocols can lend, borrow, exchange governance tokens and their associated votes kind of in a trustless and highly secure model. everybody kind of does staking these days, and it's not that hard to find a staking fork that does most things. So basing development off of these kind of open access forks is generally speaking kind of a good way to go. So that's one reason why we looked in that direction. Specifically with delegation, though, the vulnerability is that delegate markets don't have great oracles yet. They just are very kind of exposed to front running. You couldn't really imagine having a Flashbots level of sophistication for putting in voting today. We simply just don't have it, and to the extent that votes can be changed, votes can be taken and kind of can be deposited and withdrawn. We just don't know how changes in the underlying market affect kind of voting oracles, which right now are at a very nascent stage. For that reason, making any kind of sophisticated, purely on-chain smart contract that has a bribery mechanism would be incredibly vulnerable. You're using this entire class of untested oracles based on, that are trying to report governance information. It's simply that to us was a much bigger risk to our users and to their staked votes than the alternative. So we use a staking model. The bigger issue with the staking model as a final point, or the kind of the one remaining issue with the staking model, the model that we actually are taking, is that you can't, you typically with staking, you can't use your token both in the staking contract and somewhere else. So we recognize that there's a bit of opportunity cost there. If you're staking Aave with Bribe, you can't stake it elsewhere. Well, there are two things. We do kind of have two solutions for this early on. One is already implemented. Of course, it is staked Aave. With staked Aave, it is a receipt token which you get from Aave for staking your Bribe, or I'm sorry, for staking Aave on the Aave platform. So I take my Aave, I stake it into Aave. I'm getting about 7% yield on that right now, and I get a receipt token called staked Aave. With my staked Aave, which is earning 7%, I can then go and vote. Of course, that means that you can put staked Aave into Bribe. So I'm not only getting my 7%, but now I'm getting Bribe returns. I'm also getting the USDC bribes as well. So I'm taking so now that APY is starting to look pretty nice. Especially with early liquidity mining emissions. And on top of that, we have now built an internal Bribe solution, which gives you yet another receipt token. So now we're giving out staked bribed Aave, which is kind of the receipt token indicative of an asset which is getting rewards from Aave, from Bribe, and in USDC from the Bribe bidders. This hyper capital efficient asset we're super excited about, which as a receipt token itself can now have other uses on top of that. So those kind of other uses really yet to be explored by the team. However, it's something that we're really excited to dive into. Hopefully that that long form description kind of makes sense to you guys, why we've ended up going the staking model. The short of it is that it's safer and better tested. Of course, we have gotten audited, and in the long run, we hope to do whatever we can to lower the opportunity cost to voters and to stakers, frankly, on our platform.
Great response. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people were interested in that. I was interested in that the other day when I asked you about it. So I think that's a really popular question. We do have someone who's requested to speak. I'm going to invite them up.
Yay.
Ahmed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Apologies for that. Hi. Firstly, thank you for running this space. I'm relatively new to the government space. I was just a bit curious, and apologies if this has already been answered. but why would someone go through Bribe instead of buying the Aave for voting directly from the market?
Great question. Probably a better one to start with at minute 2. Great question. It is, the short answer is that it's cheaper. The amount of Aave that you need to kind of affect a governance decision is anywhere from $50 to $100 million worth of Aave. On other kind of DeFi protocols that have been around for a few years at this point, that number is even higher, closer to 150 million for Compound, 400 million for Uniswap. So the amount of purchasing power that you're talking about needing to get that exposure is considerable. The other piece I should mention is that these kinds of loan amounts are not available on AMMs. So we're targeting $50 to $100 million worth of Aave. In order to secure something like that today, I would need to borrow up all of the Aave available on like Compound and, related kind of similar protocols, and then probably sign a few OTC deals, and then probably convince a couple of delegates to back me as well. There's kind of, it feels like this insurmountable effort for, just an individual with a really good idea to go through, but that's the kind of the reality of the space today. The other thing that we have to mention, and, new to governance, I'm sure, if you're not new to DeFi, you're familiar with this term of slippage. I'm kind of on a slippage kick right now. So if you, when you're looking for kind of alpha in governance, this idea of slippage is still very much alive and well. Even purchasing $50 million worth of Aave would drive the price up so much that, you'd be talking about 2-3x at least, the starting price. And whereas, and you would also kind of take on exposure to the governance token as you're doing that. It's much simpler for a DAO or basically a bidder, someone who wants to bring about a governance outcome. It's much simpler for them to borrow for a very short period of time, like a week, to borrow the full amount that they need. That way, they're again not taking any exposure to the underlying. And they're getting exactly as much exposure as they need to kind of bring about their outcome for as long as they need it, which is only a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Great question. Anyone else? Anyone else have another, wants to come up and ask another question? Well, I have a question then. What's the next? So we're doing Aave now. We have a proposal for Mim. Maybe go through the Mim proposal for people who are not acquainted with it yet.
Totally. This is the most. This is like the most exciting thing that we're working on right now. Really, the crux of all of the work that we've been doing at Bribe so far, to build the community, to build the use case for the token, and really, start adding some value to a DAO as Bribe. The first example of how we're doing all of these things is through the Mim proposal. Of course, that entails we are supporting the Abracadabra community, which you can poke into abracadabra.money, their website. We're supporting that community to get their kind of ecosystem stablecoin listed on Aave as a collateral type. Couple of different ways that we think about this exercise. Of course, it is the first time where we'll be going through that kind of bidding process that I just described. So accumulating a bunch of Aave tokens to support the vote. Of course, actually, voting on the vote once it reaches on-chain decision making. So it's our first opportunity where we're really actioning the protocol and voting on a proposal. However, we also look at it as bridging what is an inefficiency in DeFi markets, which is that integrations, they take too long to happen, even if they make a lot of sense. Again, they need to be proposed by someone who is a very strong and influential actor in the ecosystem. And so the fact that Aave kind of hasn't considered adding Mim yet, although it fits a very similar use case and risk profile as a lot of other collateral types on Aave, we look at that and see a missed opportunity. As including Mim in the ecosystem with Aave actually has benefits on both sides. For Mim, of course, it's an additional use case and additional liquidity for their stablecoin. For Aave, it means potentially additional fees and a higher TVL for the protocol at large. So yeah, just this really nice synthesis of the different work streams that Bribe has been driving, and we're really excited to see how the proposal goes.
Awesome, great. We can talk more. We have a request right now. Let me bring him up. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
I have a question for BrainJive. That's possible.
Yeah, sir. Fire away.
So I saw your article recently on the benefits of cross-chain governance as opposed to multi-chain. Now, my question to you is, in response to Vitalik's arguments for multi-chain governance, how do you propose Bribe can help or give us advantages in terms of cross-chain governance?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so basically, like the collaboration with Bribe all began with re-examining what's wrong with governance overall, right? And as I introduced the concept of like, how do we optimize for cross-chain voting so that people on L2 can be able to vote for L1 based governance protocols after we have L1 decisions get propagated to L2s? We started to actually just realize that before we can tackle any of that stuff, that's where voter extractable value needs to actually be implemented. And so that's like the first real milestone for Bribe is just improving governance participation as a whole so that we can get people to give a shit really about cross-chain governance, right? That's then becomes phase 2. And phase 2 is basically how do we have this concept of not only cross-chain governance from this voting standpoint, but also cross-chain governance as a primitive to ensure that cross-chain communication and cross-chain transfers actually happens properly. There are, like, for instance, some sort of methods out there that utilize Chainlink, such as like Layer 0, that just look at headers of different chains, but don't really prevent it against 51% attacks or collusion between different off-chain infrastructure pieces. The ultimate end goal of cross-chain communication is ensuring that we have the ability that if a chain were to be, I mean, at the end of the day, Vitalik's an engineer, right? Like, he's not a degen. So from his perspective, he's just looking at it from a very like base level, like low level standpoint. Like, how can we have cross chain if one chain becomes 51% attacked, right? And what tooling like Bribe can provide is basically a framework with which this would mostly operate as a backend. I don't think this would be like a user-oriented infrastructure piece. This would mostly be something where basically we have the chain that has been frozen from a 51% attack needs to have the other chain with which transfers and communication had been occurring vote to pick the header that they'd like to basically reignite synchronicity, basically. So this like infrastructure is really important because, and this is exactly like, taken straight out of Polkadot's book. Like we're not really reinventing the wheel here. We're just like expanding this tooling to the broader ecosystem. The complicated thing, right, is what actually happens. What actually happens in practice? How is this going to work in practice, right? And this is like.
Hey, you might be muted, Brenda.
Oh, sorry. Well, what was the last thing that you guys heard?
You said something about in practice.
Yeah, right. So in practice, basically, Bribe protocol is going to focus heavily on cross-chain voting, right? But the extension of this, and this is like the interest that I have and the interest that Composable as infrastructure is interested in doing, is this concept, which would lie within XCVM, which is how does cross-chain governance beget cross-chain communication and cross-chain synchronicity? We cannot leave this up to like an oracle or some sort of like off-chain infrastructure that's very easily gamed. This needs to be like a robust process, like almost as fast as, for instance, governance processes for runtime upgrades on Polkadot parachains. So this is stuff that we're collaborating with Bribe Protocol on in order to develop, but it's definitely very much a composable relevant question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, kind of answered my question. The main issue I had was basically, the 51% attacks, which you mentioned as well, which Vitalik was talking about, in terms of protection for that, and how you would sort of, prevent something like that happening on a cross-chain platform.
Yeah, I mean, we can never prevent. We can only react, right?
Okay.
And this is exactly.
Makes
so.
sense.
I mean, there's definitely the possibility that some like L2 that we're working with gets 51% attacked for whatever reason, or like some random chain just like goes down or whatever. And this is exactly then where we would have to trigger governance to go in and pick the last block to say, okay, this is the last block that we're going to continue, regenesis from. That's
Okay.
yeah.
It makes sense now. Thanks. Thank you very much.
That was a great question. Thank you for that, and an amazing explanation. To add to that point, Bribe was conceived for that reason, really, to protect cross-chain governance from, being able to protect a sovereign from one chain to another. Is that more or less correct?
I mean, I would say the original idea was like in conversations with Condorcet, like there was a clear illustration. I wouldn't say this piece is a piece of infrastructure that we have to think about from day zero with Composable, right? But it was more so just thinking about, okay, we have L2s. The community of people who are using L2s are very different from the communities who are using L1s. And yet the majority of protocols are L1 governed. So like, if you literally think about, for instance, L1 becoming the whale dominated chain, and L2s becoming like the people's chains, then you sort of start to see like whales governing the people. And so cross-chain governance is very much so, cross-chain voting is very much so what's, a solution to allowing the average DeFi degen the ability to like actually still care about how a protocol is governed and not just leave their decisions up to the whales. And so that's basically how Bribe originated, like in speaking with Condorcet.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's totally makes sense. Who is next? Who wants to ask the next question? Nobody at all, really? Other than the LBP, we just discussed the uses for governance. It's way more than just controlling DAOs, it's protecting networks. What would you say the like kind of the next what haven't we thought of yet? Oh wait, we have requests. Let's have Badgers come up first. Hello, hello.
Yo, yo, yo.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So on the topic of Wales controlling voting, I was wondering how Bribe will also tackle that, because I know like bribe emissions are directed to the pool where bribes holders actually vote for. So essentially, Bribe Wales would be able to control essentially where the votes go by allocating their rewards to that pool.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Condorcet.
If we're familiar with VE33, it's a really useful framework actually to look at this. So yes, with pool specific bribe staking, not votes, but emissions are directed to particular bribe pools which are aligned to DAOs. Aave bribe pool, tokamak bribe pool, so on and so forth. So by, as a bribe staker, one of your kind of mechanisms for improving and drawing attention to the ecosystem that you operate in is staking bribe into that particular bribe pool. Whether you care more about tokamak or Aave, we'll find out when the bribe stakers essentially vote, if that makes sense. Fees, of course, per VE33, fees are also directed to the bribe stakers of a particular pool. So as a baseline, you are incentivized to vote for the pools that are drawing the most fees.
Yeah, I get that. I'm basically saying, so like, essentially you get emissions from winning the vote. So Wales are going to put where they want to win the votes, right? So I'm like, how are you guys at Protocol are going to like, you want to basically eliminate whale power for every other DAO, but within your own DAO, how will you eliminate that as well?
It probably starts to look a lot more organic when there are a number of bribe pools. To be honest, this is an interesting question. Like, I would love if you can think through like specific like problem cases where we don't want whales to have that decision-making power. That's certainly helpful. However, again, like as a baseline for the protocol, the place where large bribe holders are kind of staking their tokens is also the place that those holders care about affecting governance or think that affecting governance could be very well monetized. And so I actually, again, as a baseline, don't see a problem with that kind of relationship.
I mean, also, like, as Condorcet mentioned, Bribe has basically specific pools where Bribe, for instance, as Condorcet was mentioning, STK, Aave pool, like Bribe, basically, this governs the Aave pool, right? And then another staked Bribe governs another pool, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have basically fragmentation of governance per pool, which keeps the general Bribe governance kind of focused on the mission of execution of like pool specific bribing, basically. Also, additionally, like in the future, like there's definitely lots of things that can happen, such as bribe for bribe. I don't know if we want to like tease any of that alpha. Probably not. We'll save that for later.
Well, but just what's important to highlight, though, is that in the same way as the curve gauges, kind of in that same manner, you don't need to be a bribe whale to get emissions. Emissions are directed, regardless of how much bribe you have, essentially. So emissions are fairly directed to the bribe stakers. It does matter, however, emissions are also directed, of course, to, to the voters on a particular platform. So the edge cases that are important are where you have lots of bribe, but you're not kind of a voter on a platform, if that makes sense. I don't think that this is really kind of whales against, smaller users, if that makes sense. It's more about, do you have bribe, or do you have, or are you a participant in the underlying DAO?
Cool. Thank you for answering. I appreciate that. Have you ever thought about using a different governance model?
I think pool specific has always been on our mind. Of course, would say, like, as a user of the Aave bribe pool, most people should be primarily users of Aave, because those are the folks who have the best sense of their risk tolerance and of how governance could actually be best kind of monetized in a way that controls for risk. So as far as like governance model goes, foundationally, pool specific has always been an important part of our narrative. I'm always up to hash out, new ideas, though, if something comes to mind. And the alpha idea that we're not going to leak is around just the DAO model for bribe, which, as you can imagine, the only reason we're not leaking it yet is that we want to focus on mainnet this week, of course, like make sure that goes well before we commit to kind of updates in the future. But so just trying to stay focused now. But yeah, I mean, like, governance is continuing to change every day, so we definitely want to stay flexible here.
Awesome. Thank you for answering. It sounds like you want to maybe implement a fairer governance model, which sounds cool. So cheers, guys, for answering. I'll leave you guys to it.
Thanks for stopping by, Badgers.
Well, look, I mean, when you say fairer, do you mean, I'm curious, should we get into this? Like, what do we think about identity-based governance on the call? Like, are you all part of any DAOs that kind of do voting? I've seen a couple of, I think it was Andre posted like a Twitter vote or something. Like, can we add that to this stack? Snapshot, and Twitter. I wonder if it's an idea that resonates with anyone. But of course, right now, we're thinking of going with absolutely like the traditional governance token approach. It seems to be the right move right now. But yeah, definitely curious you all's ideas on other stuff.
I had a quick question, actually. Seeing how votes are distributed to the highest bidder, do you think that there are there potential guardrails or concerns about the potentially malicious proposals?
Yeah, now this is the more tactical stuff, definitely that we're thinking about right now. One of the reasons we integrated with Aave, of course, is that they have the Guardian multisig, which is a veto mechanism. Conceptually, it kind of provides a backstop against adverse behavior on the platform. Basically, that is to say, if I want to submit like a crazy proposal, like shut down Aave to Aave governance and think that I can bribe a bunch of money such that this gets passed, of course, the
Hello, you got muted. I don't know why.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so I mean, Ave's veto mechanism means that even if I'm even if I'm a bad actor, I can that decision can be reversed, and essentially I'll have lost out on all of my bribe money, despite the fact that the governance proposal has gone through. So as a basic backstop against adverse behavior, we do have this Aave veto mechanism. Bribe, however, has its own veto. And so when we think about how to, stop adverse behavior on the platform, in the near or kind of in the midterm, bribe governance really comes to the fore. And this becomes the first major use case for bribe governance beyond just emissions, is controlling this veto mechanism.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Hardy, welcome.
Hey, thanks. My questions aren't around governance. If you want me to kind of change topic a little bit, or if you want to continue going on governance with other speakers, just let me know. Um, but so my understanding, so there's 2.5 million tokens in the liquidity pool tomorrow. And then Mim or Abracadabra said they'd come out and potentially go up to $5 million for the Mim on Aave proposal. And I believe yesterday it was said that like 10% of that 5 million, if they went up to 5 million, so 500,000 would then be returned to the bribe holders that staked for that Aave pool. So that's like 500,000 or 20 cents a token. Is that correct?
I mean, yeah, that sounds right to me.
Okay. Where does the other like 4.5 million go to? Does that go to the treasury and kind of what's
No. It goes to the Aave stakers, and then 6% goes to the treasury. But like the overwhelming majority goes to the people who've actually staked Aave. So like you
Okay.
stake as an Aave staker, you get paid out in USDC or Mim directly from the bribe.
Okay, do the Aave stakers also get like bribe tokens as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. That was it.
That's like
Yeah.
honestly pretty crazy APY for like Aave, considering Aave itself has nowhere to be used.
And you're still
Yeah.
getting your Aave staked rewards, right?
Exactly. That's why like delegation doesn't work. That's why we had to go through this like whole like on-chain hassle, because we want to still make sure that the rewards distributions go to the users.
Chu, what's up?
Oh, hi there. My question is actually related to the 4.5 million possibly going to Aave stakers. I'm just trying to think from a LBP perspective whether it's better return to buy Bribe and stake in the pool and get perhaps 10 to 20 cents, or buy Aave and stake them to the Bribe pool. How do you think about the return on that front?
I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, the way I think about the Aave pool is it's very much similar to like almost like a crowd loan in some respects, but it's obviously like shorter duration. But basically, like you stake your Aave in the pool, you get paid out in USDC. If you're like a large holder of Aave and you're in that pool, obviously like you get more USDC than people who just committed like a couple dollars worth of Aave, right? So it's really just like game theoretical things. Like if you, the chances that there's more Aave staked in the pool, thereby distributing the APY pro rata to basically result in like lower APYs for Aave stakers is definitely, I think, higher than what at least I would, again, this is not financial advice, but what I would expect from basically people staking their bribe, right? Like we obviously hope that the majority of people stake their bribe into this pool. But, you know, I think the majority of people are definitely going to just be trying to grab the token and hold it. It may just not even pay attention that you can do something with the token, right? Like, who knows? So I think from my standpoint, I just feel like the opportunity is quite lucrative for people who have been paying attention and for people who know how much money is actually getting, like real money. Like we're not talking about native tokens, like we're talking about literal USDC MIM getting deployed to people who are staking bribe. So if it were me, I would probably be staking bribe and I would be doing both, but I think it just makes a ton of sense to just buy from the LBP and stake it into the bribe pool, because the majority of people might just buy the token and hold it just to see what happens as like a curve wars, like bribery, like very clear exposure to like curve wars bribery play.
Okay. Thank you. I also got a unrelated question to this one. I'm just thinking about the Kusama governance or Docsama governance. Like for runtime upgrade, it's really fast. But for things like maybe getting better product team and getting better marketing is not very efficient. So how do you think about perhaps bribes or other governance mechanisms for something that is not immediately financial, but have long-term benefits to the ecosystems?
I mean, I'm just waiting until the Kusama treasury becomes public. Like, sorry, yeah, I mean, like when it's not governed by the council anymore, right? Like the problem why nobody uses the treasury right now is because the council doesn't vote. Like, and plus we also have massive bonds. Like for every, I'm not sure if people knew this, but for every like $1 million worth of liquidity incentives that you want to be unlocked from the Kusama treasury, it's basically like $50,000 need to be put down by the team. So for instance, when I made that $5 million proposal, I'm supposed to put down $250,000 of KSM, and I may not even have that voted in by the council, in which case I basically forfeited like a Ferrari, right? Worth of KSM.
Yeah.
And so once this becomes once this bond is removed and we don't have to deal with the council anymore, then things like Bribe enable us as Composable to go in and push a vote in one specific way through like a variety of collaborations, such as, for instance, imagine we could just do like a $40 million liquidity incentive campaign for Kusama. Like it wouldn't just be us bribing that. Like Akala would bribe that. Like many other teams, I'm sure, would be interested in bribing that proposal. And so I think on Kusama, Bribe's use case is going to be very, very tangible from the jump. But yeah, to your point about like non-financial things, I mean, we can also like make proposals to the Kusama treasury for things that are not directly related to liquidity incentives, such as, for instance, commit $1 million to Beefy, like the Bridges team, right? And like we'd be happy to fund that. Like multiple people would be happy to fund that work, and like so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. A couple more questions and we can wrap it up. Anyone? All right. Well, Condorcet, maybe final words and we'll wrap this up.
Final word. Thank you all for joining. Hope that this has been helpful. There's still time for extra questions if something comes up. But final word is LBP starts tomorrow at 2 p.m. And at the time of initiation, we'll be celebrating. Of course, deserves a cheers and an excited Zoom call or two. But the way that LBPs work is that the starting price of the LBP, so at 2 p.m. tomorrow, will be $8.19. So the way that LBPs work is that price, if no one buys, of course, no one can, like during the LBP, it's not possible to sell the token. So you'll see the price immediately start going down. That is not because any of these are firm valuations of the company. It is because the idea of an LBP is that the price starts very high at $8.19 for a Bribe token and goes down from there. So you will see it plummet precipitously throughout the next 24 to 36 hours or so. This is not financial advice. That is simply how LBPs work. So thank you all for being here. I'm seeing a lot of repeated faces from yesterday. Let's, all be smart about this together. We're on a long, it's going to be great.
To Condorcet's point, literally we already know how much staking Bribe is going to yield. So like, I've never seen a history of a token in the history of token launches that there was ever something like, as almost guaranteed as the 10% of this bribe that has been voted on and is getting voted on at the moment in another community. So I think it's like a very bullish time. It's like literally USDC Mim yield on a token during this quote unquote drop / quote unquote bear market. That's really unheard of. And yeah, I'm very excited to see how Bribe, how much Aave Bribe can accrue in the coming weeks as well. So good luck to the Bribe team, and appreciate you all for your time.
Thank you. That'll be exciting.
On the final note, want to congratulate Krim98 and KMK786 for the NFT giveaway. We'll reach out to you, or you actually reach out to us if you can, and we'll get you situated with the NFT. So KRM98 and KMK786. And on that note, I think we're at a close. I think Bribe's revolutionary, and so far, no one in the space has been able to create a protocol that leverages so many things. And this is just actually the beginning. There's been very little alpha leak today, whether that's fortunate or unfortunate, but I'm sure later on there'll be more things coming out about all the possibilities that Bribe's going to bring to the different ecosystems it's going to operate on. So it's not just going to be on ETH, just some alpha there as well. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Branger and Condorcet, for coming. Thanks for all the listeners for hanging out for the past hour, and we'll talk soon.